What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have for you episode 3 of my Road to Rapid Top 1000 series. So since the last episode, I played 2 games, and the first I actually lost because I tried to play an opening system that I wasn't entirely comfortable with, and I made a mistake that led to me losing. And in the second game, my opponent walked away from the board after move 2 and lost by forfeit. But these 2 games that I'm about to show you, I played back-to-back on Friday, June 5th, and they're 2 pretty bizarre games that are both relatively short, which is why I'm going to try to squeeze them into one episode. So without further ado, let's get into the first game. I had the white pieces, and I was paired up against an opponent with the username BlitzFan. And I opened with e4, and he went for e5, and we have knight f3, knight c6, and bishop c4, the Italian game. And he responded with knight f6, which is the 2 knights defense. So I castled, he developed his bishop, and now I decided to go for the Evans Gambit. Typically, white will play this a move earlier before black plays knight f6, such as if the bishop were to develop here. Now b4 is the Evans Gambit, but I played it with a slightly different move order. And my opponent, I guess, immediately caught him off guard because rather than taking the pawn, which is actually the best move, he retreated. Now, the reason I play this is because I saw my opponent's rating was a little bit lower than mine in Rapid, so I thought that I was kind of the stronger player. But then I went on to check his profile and saw that he is a 2,500 rated blitz player. So, pretty strong guy, but this is Rapid, so I guess he is used to playing quick games in which he'll make quick decisions and be able to back them up, but here he was a little bit nervous, I guess, to take the pawn, although it's actually the best move. And after c3, attacking the bishop, the idea is if the bishop comes back here, I now attack it with tempo. And after we trade off, if he now retreats, I have a very strong center and a lot of initiative for the sacrifice pawn. I can actually overwhelm him even here with like bishop g5. My opponent instead could have here gone back to e7, and he would be actually perfectly fine here. In this situation, he could even take the pawn, and it would be tough for me down 2 pawns. I would have to really work hard to create an attack. But instead, he retreated with the bishop, and now I immediately went for b5, attacking this knight, which is defending this pawn, which is already eyed by my knight. So he went to a5 to attack my bishop, but now my knight can simply take this pawn, and it's now defending my bishop. Now what he should have done here, the strongest move would be to play d5, and after we trade, bishop takes, queen takes, rook e1, he could simply castle, and although he would be down a pawn, he would be relatively okay. And even another thing that he could have done was, and this is what I was considering, is take my bishop, and after I take, if he takes, this would be a mistake because I simply captured his bishop. And now I play rook e1, and we see that his knight is in the line of fire for my rook. And as soon as he defends it with his pawn, I can just come in with d3, and this wins the knight. But instead, he decided to go for a big complication here, and he played bishop to d4. It's forking the rook and the knight. However, I already have a lot of pressure here. And this is exactly what I did. I just took on f7 with the knight, now forking his queen and his rook. So obviously the priority is to defend the queen, so he moved it to e7, get it out the way, and now I had a big choice. I could either take his rook, after which he would take my rook, or I could maybe stop him first from taking my rook, and I decided to stop him by attacking his bishop, although I actually could have taken here because after he took my rook, I could play the move bishop to f7 check, and after king f8, now d4, and I'm just completely dominating. His pieces are very discombobulated. The queen side is not developed, and he really can't do anything against my pieces here. If he were to try to go g6 with the idea of trapping my knight and taking it, up, here comes bishop h6 mate. So he would be in a very tough place. Instead, I played c3, which is still good, and he now took my bishop, but I now take his rook. He now retreated his bishop. So his idea here was that he allowed me to take his rook, but he's hoping to win back the knight by maybe going something like queen f8 and taking it, in which case he would have 2 pieces for a rook, and he would be hoping that that would be enough for him to come back and counterattack, maybe castle long. But I did not allow this, and here I actually found what I consider the star move of the game, pawn to e5. The idea is I'm trying to give up this pawn to open up the e file on which his king and his queen lie, which is a key to attacking him. And now he has a very difficult choice. If he were to take with the knight, I simply play d4, attacking his knight, and if he were to go out of danger, here comes rook e1, and his queen falls, because there's nothing he can do to protect it, really. If he were to go something like this, I would simply overload with a knight move or a queen move. And this is actually similar to what happened in the game, you'll see soon. If he were to move the knight, let's say knight to d5, now I have queen to b3, attacking this knight and this knight. If this one were to move, I would take the other. And after a move like queen c5, d4. And now we see his pieces are all bunched up, and he's going to lose something. His knight's under attack, his queen's under attack. Just a horrible way to be bunched up like this. So after a lot of thought, he decided to take with the queen. And after I played rook e1, he played knight to e4, hoping that I would play a slow move like d3 to try to attack him here, in which case he could actually take here with the bishop, and this would be his one chance to get back into the game. He would now be able to capture my rook. However, I of course saw this and played the strongest move, d4, this pawn now completely closing the bishop out of the game. So he has to retreat with his queen, and he moved it back to e7. And believe it or not, he resigned after my next move because I already have a crushing advantage. Although my pieces are not all fully developed, I have this knight planted here in h8. My rook is extremely powerful on the e-file. My queen could still go just about anywhere. My bishop can come into the game soon. So can the knight, and his rook is in the corner. Bishop can't get developed yet. This bishop is closed out. This knight's not doing anything. This knight's pinned. King isn't castled, and queen is stuck guarding them all. So here I played queen to h5 check, and my opponent, after thinking for about 5 moves or about 5 minutes on how he could weasel his way out of this, decided correctly that there's no way and resigned. Because if he were to move the king, say here, now I can actually pick up his knight, because after queen recaptures, queen to f7 is made. And pretty much the same thing happens if he sends the king the opposite way. Again, rook takes, and after queen takes, bishop g5 check. And we see the king is trying to escape but can't, and he would have had to block with the queen. He would lose it and get absolutely torn apart. Only other thing he could have done is play g6, and the move that I was preparing here was queen d5. After which, if he were to defend with the knight, I could just come in with my knight, and once again, I'm overloading. This knight's attacking, the rook's attacking, the queen's attacking. Nothing much he can do. But actually, it turns out the strongest move here is to just take the pawn with the knight, and after pawn takes, queen takes, there's even a forced mate here. If king here, check, and here comes the bishop, and if the knight takes, we have a checkmate. So that was a pretty crushing victory. My opponent resigned on actually move 14. Pretty shocking that a 2500 blitz player was able to be disassembled so easily. Now, interestingly enough, I went back and looked at the analytics after the game. Chess.com provides a feature where the engine kind of judges the level of accuracy of your play throughout the game, which will be, if you played really well, could be 95, 96%. And if you played poorly, it could be a lot lower. And actually, if we look at the accuracy level from this game, I had an accuracy of 98.3, and my opponent had an accuracy of 6.5%. So yeah, I thought that was pretty funny, considering that he's a pretty strong blitz player. 2500, that's like practically international master strength on chess.com. So to dismantle him and have him play so poorly was, I think, pretty entertaining. Now let's get into the second game of my Road to Rapid episode 3. And for this game, I was paired black against an opponent named Jarasa from Great Britain. So they opened with c4, the English opening, and I replied with e5, the King's English variation. Now we have g3, knight f6, bishop g2, and d5. Going for a trade in the center, knight recaptures, and now a common move here would be to play knight to c3, after which knights would be traded, and then perhaps I could develop my knight. But instead they went for knight f3, immediately attacking the pawn on e5, so I defended it with knight c6, and now they castled. And interestingly enough, a couple days earlier I had played this line in a blitz game, and I went for e4 to scare away the knight, but after the knight retreated, I played f5 just to show you, and it turned out that this was kind of an overextension. I ended up losing the game, although it was in the end game. But afterwards, when I went back and looked at the line, I realized that there's something pretty interesting that black can play here. And I decided to go for it, seeing as how my opponent hadn't developed the knight, hadn't tried to get either pawn in the center. I went for e4, and after knight e1, I played the move h5, immediately starting an attack along the h-file, looking to rip white's castled king out of his home right from the go. And you might notice that the bishop can immediately take on e4, but after h4, already the threat is starting to get pretty serious. And let's say knight c3, the knight could retreat to attack the bishop, and once the h-file opens up, white is never going to feel fully safe with this rook being active. So instead, my opponent played on h4, but now here comes g5, and I'm insisting on breaking this open. Now, the best move here would probably have been to play d3 to try to counter in the center, maybe try to force a trade of pieces, maybe open up the d-file and trade queens. Instead, my opponent took on g5, and rather than recapture with the queen, I played h4, just really trying to break open the h-file. And now it's already starting to get a little worrying for white. They played queen to b3, which is not such a great move, although it does put pressure here and kind of watches the pawn, but now I captured. And if queen captures, now here comes bishop to d6, and we see that already the rook and the bishop are very active, and white hasn't fully developed yet. So my opponent took with the pawn, and now I took on g5 with the queen, and we see, again, white's structure around the king has been severely damaged. All that's left is this pawn, which I'm now attacking, and after that the bishop, but I already have this rook. I have better control of the center. If they were to take here, I can start attacking with the bishop. It's going to be very hard to defend this with limited pieces. So instead, they played actually a pretty interesting move that kind of caught me off guard for the first time in this game. d4. Attacking the queen, and although the queen is also attacking, if it were to take, white could take the knight. And now what I should have done here is simply move the queen out the way, and now lined up an attack here. And now this is very strong. If, for example, my opponent were to try to defend this pawn, which was previously under attack from the knight, now bishop to d6, and we see that all of black's heavy artillery is lined up, pointing towards the white king, and this is just going to be a crushing attack. The engine actually suggests here to take the knight with the queen and give it up to try to prolong the game, because, again, with limited pieces that white has developed, it's going to be incredibly hard to defend. But instead I took, and after queen takes d5, it looks like white kind of accomplished what they wanted to do. They got rid of my knight. They're now closing in on the king. And my queen is in kind of a weird spot. But now I just played a calm move, f5. And although my king is very open, there's really no way to get to him. This square is guarded by the knight. This square is guarded by the bishop. Nothing else that really white can do. So they went back with the queen to try to develop the knight, maybe trade off queens. And although this pawn is hanging, I decided to attack with the bishop. And after white defended with e3 now, it's really not a defense, because now here comes knight takes d4. And the idea is I'm attacking the queen. If pawn were to capture knight, huge blunder, because now it's a check to the king, and as we saw, the rook is already bearing down on the h-file. Only move really is to block with the rook, and after queen takes, bishop blocks, this is checkmate. So instead, my opponent got out of the way with the queen, although it's already becoming very obvious that they're going to lose. So here comes knight to e2 check. King comes out the way, and now bishop takes b2, unleashing the bishop. It's now a fork between the queen and the white rook. So again, white is pretty much on the verge of resigning. They tried to come up with some ideas, but queen a4, it's a check, but easily blocked with the bishop. Now they tried to retreat to trade queens, try to maybe go into the endgame where they might have a chance, but I simply took the rook. And after king takes knight, I threw in this bishop b5 check, and they actually resign here in this position on move 20. Although if they had played king f2, just to show what had happened, we could trade queens. And after I take the rook, bishop takes, and I have 2 rooks and a bishop, and I'm 3 pawns up against 2 knights and a bishop. It's simply a completely winning endgame for black. So that was the second game. Again, a very bizarre, crazy game where I played a very aggressive sideline and it paid off. My opponent could have defended if they kind of had seen it coming and known that they could have just countered in the center, but they got caught off guard, and I think my tactical awareness of the position really paid off. So I hope you enjoyed those 2 games. Let me just show you quickly the leaderboard, the standings, where I'm at in terms of the road to the top 1,000. After those 2 victories, that puts my rating at 1932, which is the highest that it's been so far. And I'm at just over the 3,000 mark. So with 1 more victory, I should be able to break into the top 3,000. So again, making pretty good progress. I'm going to hope to keep it up, and stay tuned until the next episode. Bye-bye.